What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I am your host, Louis Ezekiel, and joining me today, my friend and yours, Shams Benamor. Shams, how are you this fine Tuesday evening?
Doing well, back into the fantasy mode of second-guessing every single one of my moves because is it not enough data, or do I need to actually start and doing things now instead of sitting around? So back in fantasy action.
Yeah, I'm definitely enjoying the fantasy psychology. I narrowly lost a match last week to the person who picked right before me, and he took 2 Ottawa Senators and got 3 games each from his top 2 picks, and I had Kaprizov and Ovi and got 3 games total from between the 2 of them, and it was just a brutal way to kind of have a schedule loss. My depth scoring helped me stay in it, but a tough one to take a loss to start the season. I'm feeling better about the new week, and I'm trying to do a better job of being at peace and letting go and moving on from things that are unfortunate. So I'm going to see if I can stick to that. Never have been able to before, but, when you're very competitive, at least at these types of things, that can be a challenge sometime. But a great first week of the Cupful, really fun, back and forth, ups and downs. We have, the Allied chat competition now where our different draft positions are battling it out against each other. There's just so many different ways to compete on various matrices in the Cupful. It's really fun to play. I know you had a great first week too. So, this week maybe a little bit more of a challenge for you, but hoping it all goes well. We're going to run through some headlines today. We've got some injury and ouchery news and a couple hot and cold streaks to wrap up the episode. Shams, let's get into it. Start us off with some really exciting news out of Philadelphia.
Sean Couturier is back, and he actually scored a goal in his first game. It was on a penalty shot, but I'll take a goal in any way. And this is a weird mix. Last week, we were talking about how do we feel about Vancouver after they demolished Edmonton. Now, Philly just absolutely destroyed Vancouver. So we don't know how much of this was Philly, how much of this was Vancouver, but it was nice to see Couturier back, and he was sided with Atkinson and Tippett, which is a really nice looking line. And then the second line was Lawton with Konechny and Forrester, with Cates with Brink and Farabee. And that looks like an interesting top 9 to me. And then the nice thing for me as well is we can all agree Couturier is their best player just in general, maybe if you want to talk heart, but skater at the very least. And then with him being with Tippett, that might save people, because I know there was a lot of discussion about just Tippett being buyer's remorse. Now, keep in mind, he is only on power play 2, but he did have Tippett, I'm talking about, had 4 shots and a block, where sure, they didn't get involved in any of the 2 goals that they got. That is a lot more interesting in Cupful, where you're getting about 2.5 points even without actually getting a goal. And then having Couturier there just makes that top 9 actually look like somewhat serviceable.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I know you're not making a pun here talking about Sean Couturier being back, but you said it a couple times and I can't help but think it. Brink has looked good. Demko robbed him at point blank range. That was a nice little save, but he could have been on the board. And I was thinking about this too. Maybe this was just a case of Vancouver having Edmonton's number those first couple games, because we know that they are not, a team that is going to routinely beat contenders 8-1. I just felt like the sort of thing where, it's a really nice win, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. They're not going to be total world beaters. And clearly heading into Philadelphia today, they just couldn't hack it. So we'll see if they have the capacity to beat teams that are not the Edmonton Oilers. But great to see Couturier back. Certainly that top 9 looks a little more interesting. Talked about Konechny, being able to create regardless of who his teammates were on the mega show with Brian and Elon. So a safe spot for him to be. A couple other headline items. A really nice first post-baby start for Darcy Kuemper. We saw that Charlie Lindgren has gone day to day with a minor injury that he experienced during practice. So safe to say, this new dad is going to get the next few starts in all likelihood. So hope he's getting his sleep. Also, some interesting news out of Washington, and something that a lot of us had definitely been hoping to see, and I've been talking about since the preseason. Dylan Strome practicing at center one. Obviously, the Caps are tired of only getting production from Phillips against his former team. And Connor McMichael, they want to see some more scoring from the top half. And I think putting Dylan Strome at center one is going to give them that opportunity. It's where I thought he should have been from the start. Adds a little bit of youth onto that line, a little less Paleolithic for the Caps. And I think that's going to be a good idea. And hopefully we'll see him slot up into power play one as well. So those folks who took Dylan Strome late, I had mentioned, I don't know if it was on Twitter or on a show or in the Discord, but I was saying, just hold on to him. It's going to be fine. Water finds its level. He's going to find his place here. And it seems like after 2 games, he's in his spot. And hopefully that's good news for Ovechkin too. We'll be talking about him a little bit later when we get to hot and cold streaks, but I'm hoping that might be a spark for him as well. Speaking of people named Strome, we saw a pretty nice showing from Ryan Strome so far to start the season. He's on line 2, but power play 1, 3 assists in a couple games. What are your thoughts on Ryan Strome as a potential deep add? And everyone's crazy about the Ducks and their off-night schedule. This could be an interesting option.
It is something to keep in mind is that while I am going to talk about some nice things about the Ducks, is that when I was looking at them for their recent schedule, they actually don't have that many off-night games for the next few weeks. So make sure of checking the schedule. They might start flipping back later in the year. But to go back to the Ducks, is that it's actually interesting is that I don't have many teams that I'm like hesitant to draft from in the NHL. You have to find wherever you can get. But when I was drafting for Cupful, I was actually hesitant to just take any Duck just because of their just the vibes and just the team in general has just never really been that productive. Even your Zegras last year had many doubts and whatnot of production. I might be getting a little bit interested in the team. Now, mind you, it's not a high bar to get more interested in what I was at before, but having Leo Carlsson with Zegras and Terry as the first line, and then that means you could have McTavish, which is a high-level prospect on its own right, with Strome and Petrano. We joke about, he's not the biggest name, but he got a hat trick. You have to have some skill to be able to get a hat trick. So a top 6 that can do some spice, and then having Strome on the second line, not have to bear everything on 5v5, and then on top of that, being able to be with those great players, or great for the Ducks, on power play 1. Feels like you could get some use out of him. Now, as I said before, double check. I'm with you. I just assume that they're going to be off night every week, but they don't have that many coming up. But something to keep in mind that, Ducks might actually be serviceable in your fantasy team this year.
Yeah, I like that. It is important to not get stuck in your modes of thinking, to be open-minded, to be willing to change your way of thinking, because if you don't have that level of plasticity, you find yourself in a position where you're just going based on assumptions, and that's not always a great way to do things. I think that's a really good piece of advice there. We're going to jump into our injuries and outjuries, mostly focusing on the injuries, unfortunately, but it is early in the season. That's what tends to happen. And we've got one that just occurred. What do we know about Gabe Vilardi going out just here on Tuesday night during the first period with a lower body injury?
He ended up getting tripped. I forget by who, but they were talking about that it might be a knee issue. He wasn't putting much pressure. We don't know anything right now as of this moment. All it is announced is that he's not to return with a lower body injury. So that's all that we see. Now, as we mentioned before with Hall getting injured, we are going to be speaking about who's playing now, but keep an eye out for practices into the future to see what sticks. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that everyone's favorite punching bag, Ehlers, is actually on line 1 with Scheifele and Connor. So we'll see if it sticks. We'll see if anything happens, but he actually has deployment. So now, before you get too happy, he's still on power play 2 because they had to, bring up stalwart Kupari to power play 1. So he doesn't get everything, but as a person that drafted Ehlers in Cuffle, I will take anything I can get, and then being with those 2 players on 5v5, hopefully it sticks. That'll be a nice boot for him, and then we'll just have to wait and see what the diagnosis is with Vilardi, if it's a short-term, long-term kind of thing.
Yeah, I do wonder, because you pointed out, we got to think about what could potentially come next. What, just because something is happening during the game doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stick. I worry a little bit about the depth for the Jets if you do put Ehlers up on the top line and kind of load up with that first line. But it could be really interesting to see. And clearly, the key to joining Power Play 1 is to be a former King. That's really what is the badge of honor for getting people up onto Power Play 1 for the Jets. Another injury we need to talk about is Steven Stamkos. He was not able to play during Sunday's game. I believe they mentioned it on the big show, but we did get to see the debut of that Power Play 1 with Hedman, Sergachev, Kucherov, Point, and Paul. So Paul holds a spot. Sergachev slots in for where Stamkos had been. And yeah, we're seeing that play out here tonight. So obviously that's a blow. I've got Jonas Johansson, so I'm a little worried about, what they're going to be able to produce defensively and if they're going to be able to produce offensively. Currently it is 2-1 against Buffalo, so we'll see how that plays out. You'll know more than us. You don't need live updates of a game that is already over. So let's move on to the next guy. Talked about this a bit, I believe, on the Mega Show as well, but a little more information. Pavel Buchnevich, day to day. What's the latest update on him? Who's taken his spot? Do we know anything about the power play?
So as of now, nothing official on the injury other than basically they want him to be fully healthy before coming back. And then also with the way it was the beat reporter that I was following kind of hinting towards that they're thinking that it's unlikely to play Thursday, so we'll have to keep an eye out for it. Unfortunately, there was no actual practice of the power play, so we don't know how that is being done. But we did see 5v5 practice, and Saad did take Buchnevich's spot with Kyrou and Thomas. And then while they haven't been doing so great this year so far, that is the premier spot to be. So we'll have to wait and see if Buchnevich is out of how long, but there's a good chance that he's not playing on Thursday. And if you somehow have space on your lineup on Thursday or have a very deep league, Saad could be an interesting player to pick up for that game if Buchnevich is actually out.
Yeah, and I think the silver lining there is if they're saying unlikely for Thursday, that means, it's not so bad and maybe we get to see him come back, relatively soon. So maybe this is not going to be one of those lingering day-to-days that never really seems to end. One last, just a couple updates on some people taking other people's positions at practices. We got an update. This is from at Fantasy Hockey Trades. No vowels in fantasy or hockey. Just a few things to keep an eye on. We saw Marcus Johansson take Boldy's spot on Power Play 1 for the Wild. Josh Anderson moving into Kirby Dach's spot on Power Play 1 for the Habs. I think that might have been discussed on the Sunday show. Henry Thrun back in the lineup with Vlasic's injury for the Sharks. And then Roope Hintz back in practice, hopefully going to play here on Tuesday evening. Seems very likely that that's the case. But you never know with Hintz. It's always a day to day until it's not. And finally, Connor Brown demoted down to line 3. I don't think that'll stick, for a long, long time, but just another case of one of those third wheels up on the top line, not necessarily, being able to hang with Connor McDavid. They did want to load up that top line. So it's Evander Kane, McDavid, and Draisaitl right now. They are having a nice game, leading 4-1 against the Predators. So you might see that stick for a little while, although you imagine eventually they would love to have a little bit more spread out power in their top 6. Zach Hyman also having a very nice game with a goal and 2 assists already. So despite being separated from Draisaitl, he's still making it work. So nice job for Zach Hyman. We are going to head into a short break here, and when we come back, we'll talk about some hot and cold streaks and a couple players we might be ready to panic over. You are listening to Short Shifts. Welcome back to Short Shifts. I'm just realizing that I forgot to say what's up, champs, at the start of the episode. I'm still getting into my mid-season form, just like the guys that we are going to spend some time talking about right now. Let's start in New Jersey, a team that there's been so much buzz and excitement about over the offseason, a team that certainly is capable of scoring in bunches, but one guy who is missing out on the action is Timo Meier. For all of the concerned Meier fans out there, Shams, should it be Timo Meier panic time?
This is going to be a situation where, early in the season, so got to be being careful of what you take, but I'm not too interested in Timo Meier because my paranoia is that the coach shows with their split power play that they're not interested in just stacking the top line or stacking all their best players and then putting them into positions to win. So basically what could happen is that we could have a situation where it's easily like Hughes with Mercer and someone else, and then like he's sure second line and Timo right away on the third line. Or maybe they put him just basically, to put it in a succinct way, is that they don't need Timo Meier to win. Like, definitely they'll help him cross the finish line with for a Stanley Cup playoffs or whatnot, but they don't need to feature him in every position to get into a successful way. And the coach has showed he's willing to bench him because literally did that. So basically, even if they did have the talk of like, oh, we talked to getting it better, this is almost kind of gives me a weird feeling of like JT Miller vibes from last year, that like, just because you're good, if you're not on the right side of the coach and they have other players that they can play over you, it could be dicey. Now, I'm not sure what the take of it, but that's like, I like thinking about potentially buying low on people, but if someone tries to sell me Timo Meier, I'm not interested in trading for him, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, so this was a guy who went number 20 on average in the cupful, so he's like a mid-second round guy. Certainly not performing up to those standards yet. No points through the first 3 games. I did see Bill Spalding tweeted, he said, Dano mentioned on the broadcast, but Timo's historically taken time to get going. Last season, he had 0 goals and 2 assists through the first 9 games. In 2020, 2021, he only had 1 goal, 4 assists through the first 10 games. In 1920, he had 2 goals, 2 assists through the first 15 games. Once he got into November, he never really stopped, is what the tweet says. Now, that's great, but we are talking about a situation, and this was something that I had talked about, or I was in the chat, I think, during the Mega Show, and I think Brian and Elon brought it up in the Allied chat when we were talking about drafting and trying to decide between a couple players. I wanted this draft to go for the guy, capital T, capital G, not a guy, right? And if you listen to the Mega Show, I think you heard about this too. But in San Jose, in these other years, when he really picked up in November and never stopped, he was the guy. He was, the most talented player on the team. He was the focus of the offense. In New Jersey, he is a guy. Like you said, they don't need him to win every game. Maybe he is a difference maker come playoffs time and that sort of thing. But they can also get by without him, and they're showing that they are willing to get by without him. Now, I think all the line shuffling is some concern. I think they're trying to find some chemistry and trying to find a place that works for everybody. And so, while that plays itself out, we're going to have some growing pains, and it's nothing to panic about yet. We're still just 3 games in. But like you said, I have some concerns about Meier maybe more than I would typically have for a player of his caliber at this point in the season, just because he is in a situation where there is so much depth. And on the one hand, that depth opens the door to contribute to a ton of scoring from a lot of different positions in the lineup. But it also means that you can have that greater division of labor, and we don't necessarily see the opportunity come for that specific player, even if the opportunity on the team overall is really strong. And I think that's sort of what you were getting at. So I think I'm mostly in agreement with you. I don't know if I am opposed to the idea of buying low necessarily, but I would have to see what the deal is. I've certainly seen over the last few days on Twitter and in the Discord a wide variety of offers being made, and I see some people trying to capitalize on the name. Don't go after someone who is on a hot streak. Find somebody else who is also on a cold streak, but maybe that you believe in a little bit more. I think it was wild. I saw someone being like, trying to make some package including Meier to try and acquire Tim Stützle, and I was like, okay, but you saw what he did the last week, right? We gotta take it down a notch there. Like, don't go making wild offers because it might close the door for you in some future opportunities. And I just realized that everyone in our hot and cold streaks wears red in their uniform. Let's head over to the other big cause of concern. And I'll take the lead on this one. Is it Ovechkin panic time? This is one that is near and dear to the hearts of the podcasting family of Keeping Karlsson. I know you have Ovechkin on your roster. I believe Elon has Ovechkin on his roster. There's a lot of us who are carrying him around. Only a single hit in Monday's game versus Calgary. The previous game, he had 4 shots and some more hits. No points for this early second rounder, according to ADP. I watched that final period, and there just wasn't a ton of urgency. I hate to do the eye test, and I'm not someone who necessarily has the scouting skills to pick up on everything, but even I could see that he looked hesitant, especially on the power play to end the period. Usually you see him loaded up and ready to fire when that pass hits the left circle. 3 times during that power play, he either had to settle down pucks or he didn't have his stick cocked back and ready to blast away. He missed or had blocked the shots he did manage to fire. I think part of it is just maybe some early season rust. I know as I'm getting older, I'm about Ovi's age here. It's a little harder for me to kind of knock it off at the start of each season. I do hope that Strome at center adds a little bit of youth and vigor to that line, and hopefully some of those dishes can be a little more accurate so he can just snap and go. I'm worried, but I'm not panicking. I do think that, you've got a new coach, you've got a new situation in Washington. I do think it's going to need a little bit of time to shake out. And like we were talking about with Timo, Ovi is the guy, right? There's no doubt. There's no world where Ovi is on line 2 or power. Well, there is a world where he's on power play 2, but it's also because he's on power play 1. That's always kind of how it's been for him, right? So with that in mind, I think I'm less concerned about Ovi than I am about Timo, even though Ovi is older, a lovely, silver fox thing going like I have, so it on the one hand, like there are some signs that his game could be starting to tail off potentially, but I know he's going to be put in a position to succeed where that's not necessarily going to be the case for Timo.
So to go on the guy narrative. So I think if you looked up the guy in the dictionary, you would see Ovi's face, because he's just like the personification. Talking about power play, using Frozen Tools stats, he literally has 99.2% of the power play time for the Capitals. It just shows like how much they lean on him for that. So maybe, as I'm with you, is that I think this is more of the team is kind of feel like in disarray. It's not like, Ovi is not doing too much and then the rest is actually like firing at all cylinders. It was more of, as you mentioned before, I think it was Kuemper that basically saved them to be in a position to even have a chance to win that last game. In probably, 99 other times if they played to get to 100, they probably would be 0-2 right now. That was more of just a save on Kuemper's side, and then they got the scrappy goals. So I think what it is hopefully the team resets, and then if the team resets, we all know it's going to be because of Ovechkin. Going to be involved in that. It's not going to be like a situation where they randomly shuffle him off somewhere. So I feel like this is going to be a situation that we just hope that team kind of goes through their, first 2 games, remember, it's that like some teams played, you're talking about how the Senators had 3 last week. So hopefully a couple of games, they start getting their legs under them, they get the chemistry built, they find the lines to work with Strome, and then we'll see is that how things go, and then hopefully stuff works out. And in this situation now, I am not a fan of trading for like big name players for big name players. I like to value my draft. But if you want to get cheeky, I would be open, depending on what the price is, of trying to acquire Ovi. It all depends on how your league is and then how you know the manager. I wouldn't be spending too much overpay or like trying to get cute, but this is what I would at least entertain if you're in those kind of leagues where, like in my Cacuffle division, somehow both Matthews and McKinnon was traded before the first game was played. Like if you're one of those leagues where the big names are being traded, maybe I would be interested in seeing what you could do to get Ovi. It is a risk, but you could get a nice boon.
Yeah, tell him Timo Meier is supposed to line up with Jack Hughes and during the next game, and that Ovi's getting too long in the tooth. He can't hack it anymore. Pound that, trade Meier for Ovi setup. I think that's a great idea. But yeah, just figure out your value, figure out what you think somebody's going to be able to do moving forward. I do have more faith in Ovechkin recovering, I think, overall. All right, let's jump into just 3 quick little hot streaks here. We're very early in the season. There's not a ton necessarily to discuss. We got our cold streaks out of the way. First hot streak, Erik Haula, who's unfortunately dealing with an upper body issue. The Devils don't play again until Friday, so hopefully they have some time to sort it out. But he's been really interesting. 2 goals, 1 assist, 9 shots, and 4 hits in 3 games. Also really interesting, he scored a goal on the Jack and Luke power play unit on Monday towards the end of the game. Looked like he had replaced Palat there. Tough to tell if that will stick, given that this injury is going to cost him some practice time, but it is something to monitor. I picked up Palat because he was, in that prime position, but he seems to have maybe been shuffled down. I also had Haula on my roster, so luckily I was still able to cash in as a result. But, Devils have nice off-night schedule. Yeah, only 2 games this week, but Monday, Friday, that's a nice setup. So if you held on to him to this point, obviously you can stash him now because he's day-to-day. He's been a pretty interesting guy to keep an eye on. So just watch those lines. I'm sure they're going to shuffle 5 more times before we get to Friday, but always good. Check in with Amanda Stein. I think that's probably your best option there to see what's going on. Our next player in red on a hot streak, how about Teuvo Teräväinen? Do we feel like his streak is sustainable?
Well, if you think 80% shooting percentage is sustainable, then we got you covered. I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's like 4 goals on 5 shots. So, hey, the Canes have always been looking for a finisher. They're, the Corsi team. So we found our player. Now, it is a shame. Like, I have him in my home league, and it's someone that I'm going to ride with because he is in a good position with second line, which is, he's not with Aho, but he's still with HS, so he is with a good player. And they have so many people that, like, he might be able to get some points here or there. But basically, with that shooting percentage, being on the second line and also on the second power play, I think it's one of those situations that you just ride the points, and once it starts to dry up, because it's going to dry up, it's probably sooner rather than later, then don't be worried about dropping it. It's not, the Ovi or the Timo Meier situation where you invested so much to get him. Most likely you got him pretty late in your drafts or picked him off in a waiver wire situation in Shallow League. So view him as that, and then ride it when it's still nice, and then throw him to the wayside for the next pretty streamer when that player comes along.
Yeah, right on. All right, one last guy to talk about here. Noah Hanifin is on the quote-unquote top pair. The top 4 played pretty similarly. Getting power play 2 time with 2 of his 4 points on that power play. A nice option there if you are in need of defense. So keep an eye out there for Noah Hanifin. One other thing I wanted to bring up is, as long as we're talking Canes a little bit, just very quickly, the Canes have outscored their opponents on the PK this season. If you are in a league that counts shorthanded points, or this year shorthanded points are worth an additional point. So you get +2 in the cupful for a shorthanded point, which turns an assist into a goal and a goal into a super goal. Definitely keep an eye out for that. I am more and more trying to grab defenders who are, if I can't get a power play guy, then I want a PK guy, especially in Carolina, guys like Shea or Slavin, who might be able to get you that really valuable assist. They've been playing a really interesting power kill, so just something to keep an eye on there as well. Shams, we made it to the end of a first in-season short shifts. Maybe a little bit longer than we typically see, but not bad, I think, hitting into 32. I know I went way over when I did my solo episode, so, just getting back into the swing of things, but it was so fun to jump behind the mic with you. I'm really enjoying talking hockey with everybody. Please, I hope you enjoyed the show, and thank you for joining us. Give us a follow on Twitter at ShortShiftsKK. Brian and Elon are at Keeping Carlson. Also recommend you follow at Game Day Lines, at Game Day Goalies, at Game Day News NHL, and at Game Day Stats NHL. Or if you want the easy route, they're all organized so nicely at GameDayTweets.com. You don't need those other sites that don't show their sources. Find the site that tells you where the information came from. And Shams, of course, you are just the standard bearer of up-to-the-minute information, so gotta give you credit here at the start of the season. Please visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, ShiftChart.com, and Natural Stat Trick. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach. John Reed is our digital media producer. And until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.